lives. I've got great friends here in Texas. The people are tremendous. Those of you from Oklahoma, you're tremendous too. Don't get me wrong. One big happy family. And of course, Arkansas, I'm not going to leave you guys out. I've done Bigfooting in all the states around here. And every single time we go out, we find new information, new witnesses. You name it, man. This place is squatchy, but you guys know that. That's why you're here. I've been trying to get out to the Texas conference for literally years now, but something has always stood in my way. Usually some sort of obligation that's a drag, like work. You know, and yeah, okay, finding Bigfoot, but you work on finding Bigfoot. Yeah, okay, I work on finding Bigfoot, but it's still work. I mean, no matter how good of a job you have, it's still a job. Nobody wants one, but you got to have one, right? But Craig asked me to do a special presentation tonight, and I'm thrilled to do it because I love being at the table and meeting everybody. I love traveling and whatever else, but you know, the bottom line, I really love presentations because I was an elementary school teacher for 14 years. And so to me, you're just a bunch of 10-year-olds, and I will treat you as such, by the way. If we have time for questions afterwards, if you don't ask a question, I will say, that's not a question. Next, or whatever I did to my students. But the bottom line is, I'm thrilled to be here today because Craig Woolheater, the guy who puts on this amazing event, asked me to do a special thing because this is a very special year. This is the 50th anniversary of the Patterson Gimlin film, and it is still standing despite the skeptics and the skeptics. But all the people who have tried to tear down this pillar of our community have failed miserably, and the loudest voices are often the least informed on the subject. It's ridiculous. But that's the way it is in everything, right? Whether we're talking, I mean, you name it, I mean, politics or whatever else, the least informed are always the loudest. And this is no exception. Look at her. Beautiful, right? A total filth. A Bigfoot I'd like to film. What are you guys thinking? Oh, Texas. How the heck does this thing work? Oh, sweet, look at that, it's green. It always concerns me when it's red, because that kind of implies I'm Sith. But I'm not, I'm actually a Jedi. I don't know if you know that or not. The green, I really prefer green. So anyway, the Patterson Gimlin film subject. If you follow me at all online on my many online presences, Facebook or my website or Twitter or whatever else, you know that I'm a cast guy. Footprints are my thing. It's kind of a weird foot fetish thing I've got, I guess. Because the footprints are significant. They are physical, hard evidence. The uninformed skeptics are always saying, there is no evidence for Bigfoot. There is no hard evidence for Bigfoot. They just say, no, it's just people saying they've seen it. As many of you have said, you've seen one. And they basically say that your account doesn't matter. Well, that's kind of true and kind of not. It sure matters a lot to us, the community. But for scientists, they need something a little bit more. They need something objective, not subjective. Accounts are subjective. Because if you've seen one, how good of an observer are you? How good at putting what you saw into words are you? How good of a communicator are you? How good is the researcher you're speaking to at understanding what you're trying to tell that person? How well can they reconstruct what you saw? You see what I mean? There's a lot of filters going on there. That's what subjectivity is all about. And whereas subjective evidence, like eyewitness testimony, means a whole lot in the court of law, it means nothing, almost, to science. But footprint casts are different. They are hard evidence. Rene DeHinden, that old crotchety Bigfooter who's passed on now, he said, oh, this isn't hard evidence? Let me hit you on the head with it and you tell me what you think. It's hard evidence because whether I give it to Dr. Jeff Meldrum or I give it to whoever, they have their own opinion and their own take on it. They don't need you telling them anything. They don't need a subjective account. They have the evidence in front of them. That's cool. So I wanted to do this presentation on Patty and the Patterson Gimlin film. I wanted to look at the footprint evidence that came out of this film and what it shows us, what it anticipated, in other words, what it kind of like foreshadowed. Looking back now, in 2017, we go, oh yeah, there's this in it, there's this in it, we can see this and that. But in 1967, I mean, I hate to say it, I wasn't even alive then. I'm 46. I'll be 47 on November 28th. You can give gifts to me later. But in 1967, so much was unknown about Bigfoot stuff. But yet, everything we didn't know about the authenticity of the tracks, and therefore, the authenticity of the film subject, is right there in front of our eyes. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Anyway, the footprints of the Patterson Gimlin film. These are the two footprints that Roger and Bob cast that day. Now, I'm assuming you're all Bigfoot nerds like I am. But just in case we have some fairly new people in the audience, and I did meet some people who went by the table today and said, yeah, I'm kind of new at this. Hey, very briefly, let me tell you what happened that day. Roger and Bob were in the area because in October 20th is when they got the film, but they were there for about 2 weeks before they got the film. They were in the area because Roger was filming a documentary on Bigfoots. He wanted to film some footprints in the ground because in August, there were 2 footprint events just a few miles away from Bluff Creek. And he figures, well, they're there in August, I'm gonna go there and as soon as I can. And October was as soon as he could, to see if I can film some footprints in the ground. So he rented a camera. He eventually got in trouble for not returning it on time, by the way. He was kind of flaky in some ways. I kind of think he was ADHD, because I've got a touch of that myself, and I'm the kind of guy that wouldn't return a camera on time too. But anyway, they were down in the area, and they decided to check up the creek from where they were camping. And Roger and Bob were riding horses. They came around this big log jam, that is still there, by the way. And there she is. She's, that thing, she is in the river, basically standing there, just 25, 30 feet or so from where Roger and Bob were. The horses panic. Roger is almost thrown from the horse, but luckily Roger and Bob are experienced rodeo guys at this point. Roger's dead now, but Bob still breaks horses for a living, and he's like 86 or something. He's awesome.
He is great.
Amazing man. If you're not sure the film's real, have a conversation with Bob for 20 minutes about anything, and you'll walk away saying, that man does not lie. But anyway, Roger scrambles off the horse. He gets the camera out of the backpack, and by then she's walking away. At that point, she's about 88 feet away from the camera. Roger chases her down a bit, films her, and then Bob gets off the horse, and in fact, right there, she turns and looks at Bob, who's getting off the horse. Thank Bob Gimlin for that shot, frame 352 of the Patterson Gimlin film. There, she's looking at Bob. So they film her, she walks away, Roger yells, cover me, all that sort of stuff. And the film runs out in the camera. He basically films until no more film is in the camera, because this isn't video, this isn't digital, this is film, 16 millimeter Superchrome film, Kodak stuff. And then of course, Bob wants to follow her. Roger says, no. Don't go anywhere, you're the guy with the gun. And remember those footprints I mentioned in August that they were kind of trying to film in the ground, you know? There were 2 or 3 different Sasquatches up there on Blue Creek Mountain, not far away. And they thought that this might have been the medium one of the 3. In which case, there's a bigger one. And Roger says, no, don't go anywhere, please. So, at that point, once Roger gets his act together, they kind of, Bob tracks her up, right past here at the film site. The river kind of goes this way, and then it goes directly north for, I don't know, a quarter mile or something like that. Bob tracks her up there a bit, finds a footprint a wet footprint on a rock, that sort of thing. Comes back, and Bob and Roger, they basically get their act together. They change the reel in the camera. They start filming the footprints in the ground. By the way, the second reel is lost. No one knows where that is at this point. Be interesting. They tried to duplicate the depth of the footprints and that sort of thing. And then they cast 2 footprints Which brings us here. Wow, all that talking, and we're on the second slide. It's going to be a long night. I think the kitchen's going to cook up another meal for us. These are cool because, for me, a track nerd, let's see, where's the thing above? There it is. Okay, when you look at this is the right foot. This is the left foot. Now think about it. These are like negatives, right? So, wait, it's on the left-hand side. Yeah, but remember, she's stepping into the ground and you're seeing like the bottom of the foot. It's like if I raised my foot off the ground, you would see that same thing. This cast is now broken. There's a line across the middle. And I got a copy of this back on the table. You can see the line. The original broke before Dr. Grover Krantz made the mold of it. I have a copy from Krantz. And of course, this is the left over here. These two were made that same day. Remember I said Roger and Bob filmed some of the tracks in the ground? Well, at one point before the second reel was lost, they gave about 10 feet of the film to Renee DeHinden. Just like probably 10 seconds or something like that. I don't know how long it is. And it's not very good, but you can find it out there online. And what Bill Munns did. Bill Munns is a creature sort of maker, special effects guy. He makes museum quality replicas of extinct mammals for museums. He's worked in the movie industry, the whole 9 yards. He took an interest in the Patterson Gimlin film, thinking that it was nonsense. Here we are 10, 12 years later, and he goes, it's the real deal. There is no other way around it. He put together this composite photograph here from the film, that 10-second piece of film. And you can see, there's prints right there. So I zoomed in. These are more footprints that Roger and Bob documented that day from the second reel. A lot of people didn't even know this film still don't know this film exists. But that's part of the reason why I'm here. I'm a nerd. I care about this stuff. And I'm sure you do too. I want to share the things that I've seen over the years with you. Now we see right here that, wait, this is filled with plaster. That's it. Look at it. So this is, okay, we're not sure what this is. That's that one here. But look, right there, that's a left foot, right? You can see the big toe. Fancy name for big toe is hallux. The next foot would be a right, because that's another left. That's the right footprint that Roger and Bob cast that day. Interesting. Now, it looks real jagged along the edges, like this little black thing poking up in there and whatever else. That's because of the topography of the ground. The topography is like the little hills and valleys in the ground. And Roger and Bob are shooting this from the side, so some of the cast has been blocked. That's what makes those. But it's the same foot. But is it her foot? It turns out it is. This is Grover Krantz's copy. You can tell because it has the break that I mentioned right there. This here, fuzzy as it is that there. Because Sasquatches don't walk like people do, because they're not people. They're Sasquatches. Entirely different thing. They may be people-like in some ways, mostly superficial, but they're not people. They don't walk like people do. Because at every step, their foot comes out, almost, or their leg comes out about 90 degrees, a little bit less than 90 degrees, every single step. Humans max out about 72 or 75 degrees. But because of that, we get a straight, flat view of the feet. Now the left one here is a little, she's a little underexposed in some ways, so when you brighten it up, you lose the detail. But this one right here, you can see the toes across the top. And just look at the general shape. This isn't something that you can take measurements about either, because measurements end up being kind of subjective too at the end of the day. Because where do you start measuring? Where do you end measuring? What point do you use? But just as human beings, we're good at recognizing shapes. We're really good at it, actually. And just looking at this, the general shape, and comparing it to that, you can say, oh yeah, it is the same foot, isn't it? Okay, so we have a solid match between those two. Now, Roger and Bob got the film on a Friday, and coincidentally, the 50th anniversary in a few weeks is also on a Friday. And I'll be doing the same presentation for a group of people in Willow Creek, just an hour or so from or 2 hours from the film site on that day. But on Monday, October 23rd, a guy named Lyle Laverty, he showed up to the site. Now, he was a timber cruiser. A timber cruiser's job is to go to logging sites and kind of scope it out and mark trees they're going to cut and mark trees they're not going to cut. And just say, we're going to cut this area. No, you know what, there's a couple acres over there that look better. Let's go do that one. He found the site on Monday morning when he was at work. And so he photographed footprints that he found in the ground. And he didn't know Roger and Bob filmed this thing. He just photographed them. He used his pipe for scale, although some really mediocre researchers said this was Rene Hinden's pipe. That's not true. So he took 4 photographs of the footprints in the ground. Lyle Laverty, he's retired now. But just a few years ago, he was number 2, second in command of the Federal Department of the Interior. This past spring, I did a Google search for Lyle to see what he's up to nowadays. This past spring, I think it was in April, if I remember right, Lyle Laverty's living in Colorado right now. President Trump was going to put Lyle Laverty in charge of the Department of the Interior. That's like the level of guy that we're talking about now. And he took these photographs when he's just a little youngling back in 1967. Does the government know? Yeah, they've got a hunch, I think. But anyway, cool pictures. Let's get a little deeper into the pictures. And you know, I don't know, you see me on TV and stuff like that, but the editors make us all look very good. I wish I had editors in my regular life, honestly. Can you imagine? It's like, oh my God, I just said that. Strike that. That would be amazing, right? But one of the things I like to do, and I actually do this on Finding Bigfoot as well, because believe it or not, television is a rather shallow and superficial medium. After we do our investigations and all that sort of stuff, the producers let me loose to go take all the measurements I can get, everything that some Bigfoot nerd that they don't care about wants to get. That's what I do. My whole job is to go deeper. So let's take a deeper look at these footprints. Okay, going back here, there are the prints on the left. Let's look at the left first, and we'll get to this in a minute. On the left-hand side, there's 2 of the prints. There's one, there's one. Lyle took 4 photographs. Turns out, he photographed one of the footprints twice. I didn't know that until I started preparing for this presentation. That's what I like doing. That's one of the many reasons I like doing presentations, because I always learn something. I was a teacher. I'm a lifelong learner. That's what I do. I don't look for Bigfoot to prove the species. I'm not going to kill one. I'm a compassionate man. I know too much about them to think that it's moral to shoot one. But I want to know more because I love learning about them. They're so cool. I love learning in general. But check this out. Look at these 2 footprints. I got this online somewhere. Some good researcher out there blinked this back and forth. Some people who don't know much might argue that they're not the same. Look at the angle of the toes. No, come on. Look at the tidbits of dirt in there. The different angles of the toes is easily explainable just by a different camera angle. It's very simple. Okay, so we took 4 photographs of 3 different footprints. 9 days after the film, on October 29th, veteran Bigfoot researcher Bob Titmus finally located the film site. He had heard about the film. It had already been screened by his buddies John Green and some other folks up in Yakima, Washington. Excuse me, my lungs are still suffering from all the smoke and whatnot from the western wildfires. It was crazy, just raining down ash on my cars. Beautiful sunsets, but I'm still coughing from them, so pardon me. Bob Titmus gets to the film site, and he finds the tracks. He walked up and down the river for a long time, by the way, and he finally found them. And he cast 10 footprints in a row, consecutively, which is the best kind of evidence you can get. Because remember, think back for a minute, I guess I could flip back or whatever if you like. Just, see, like, these prints are real clean. You know, they're like, look how clean they are. Not very good information if you're a tracker. But back then, they had this idea that, if we cast clean footprints, we get an idea of what the feet look like. But Bob Titmus is not one of those guys. He knew better. He was an excellent tracker. So he cast 10 footprints in a row, no matter what the quality of the footprint. And this is the most informative track line to date. No one has cast more footprints in a row of an authentic track line than Bob Titmus. Oh, I actually have one right here. Thank you. Now, I cast 64 in a row of the London tracks, but they turned out to be a hoax. Yeah, cool, huh? Well, a lot of people, I was talking about this at the table. The London tracks, I was home for 2 weeks between runs of the show, got wind of the tracks, I went down and I gathered as much data as I possibly could. 72 tracks in total, 64 of which were consecutive. Then I went on the road for the show. And finding Bigfoot has put me on the road about 7 or 8 months a year for the last 7 years. Now, that's not in a row. I filmed for 5 weeks, I'm home for a week and a half. Film for 5 weeks, home for a week and a half. Wash, rinse, repeat. When the season ends, I'm home for a month and a half, maybe 2, then we start it all over again. 7 years. It took me about a year and a half to get to the bottom of the London track mystery. Hoaxes. Best education anyone has ever received on fake prints. I don't want to be all arrogant and all, but I'm going to go for it. No one has a larger collection of fake footprint casts. Especially between the London tracks and the LB tracks, which surfaced the same year. I've got a whole lot of fake ones in my garage. But because of that, I am now kind of an expert on what real tracks look like. Because Moneymaker, as crazy as he seems sometimes, is darn good at what he does. And one of the things he says is that you can't be an expert in real Bigfoot films until you are an expert in fake Bigfoot films. And everybody makes mistakes, of course. I make them all the time. But I took that advice to heart. And I said, you know what, that's true for prints too. I can't really be an expert in real Bigfoot tracks until I'm an expert in fake ones. So I called the guy, and long story, I'm getting off track here, but that's kind of what I do. Like I said, I'm a little distractible. And I made a bunch of fake tracks. I can duplicate the stuff in the London tracks, therefore they're fake. But I've got a great education on real ones now. But anyway, let's get back to Bob Titmus. Bob casts 10 in a row, regardless of quality. Oh gosh, I'm so distracted, I apologize. Bob also tracked the creature up the creek, up the hillside, and back above the film site, where Patty, the creature, sat down in some ferns and apparently watched Roger and Bob cast her footprints. Her footprints were never found again in the Bluff Creek region, despite her footprints being present from 1958 to 1967. And that's what we're dealing with, folks. But anyway, these tracks are extremely informative. We don't know the order they were laid down, but notice up here, this is a nice scan that Dr. Meldrum has given me for use. All of the right footprints are up on top, all of the lefts are on the bottom. We're going to get a little more into these now. Remember the Lyle Laverty photographs? Remember this one? Bob cast it. It's over here at the end. And there it is in all her glory, next to the footprint itself. Looks a little wonky in some ways, but remember, that's the angle of the camera. We're very fortunate Bob cast this print, and we're very fortunate Lyle Laverty photographed that print. Weird structures, we're gonna get into that in a minute. There's the same print from the side. You see this little lump right here, right? It's not really a lump, it's that raised mound of dirt. That raised mound of dirt is very informative. It's actually the mid-tarsal pressure ridge. Because Sasquatch feet are not like human feet. Because they're not humans. Here's another print that Lyle Laverty photographed, twice in fact. And there's the cast from it. It may look a little weird, so let me flip this around. I flip this horizontally, basically like that. I flip this cast like that, So it matched the picture a little bit. And sure enough, you can see the landmarks in it. We're very fortunate this happened as well. See all this loose dirt and like big chunks that were kind of moved? They actually, that's a mid-tarsal pressure disc. Different term, same idea. I'll go a little bit deeper into that in a few moments. So all in all, this is a composite of all of the footprints that were taken at the Patterson Gimlin film site. Not necessarily cast, we have photographs in here. But this is all of the evidence that we know for sure came from the Patterson Gimlin film site. There's another cast in the data set. I don't have a picture of it here. There's another cast in the data set that may have come from the same film site. It ended up in Grover Kranz's collection from another researcher. Name escapes me at the moment, but I'm sure it'll come to me when I don't have a microphone in my hand anymore. It may actually come from the film site as well. We don't know. That's why it's our job as Bigfoot nerds to appropriately document our research. So stuff like that doesn't happen in the future. But anyway, there's all of them. So we have the 10 from Bob Titmus, we have the 2 from Roger and Bob, and then we have these 4 footprints from Lyle Laverty. I did not include this one because Bob cast it. I did not include this one because Bob cast it from the photographs. It's kind of a lot. We're really lucky to have all those. Now we know they're not fake, by the way. I wanted to throw this in there before I get into the mechanics of the Sasquatch foot, because remember I said the London tracks, I got a pair of fake stompers? Yeah, I called up the hoaxer, the guy who planted, actually it turns out he didn't plant, which is interesting, another whole story. But I'm writing a book, probably writing a couple actually, and I'm going to do a whole chapter on this, so you can read more about it later. But I said, hey, you don't happen to know anybody, like I'm talking to the hoaxer now, right, the guy who planted these prints. I said, you don't happen to know anybody who has a fake set of stompers I can experiment with, do you? He goes, oh, I'd love to make you a pair. Well, that would took me by surprise because I thought he had a pair. But, so he made me these. I borrowed them for about a year and I did a lot of experiments. And it turns out that when you make fake footprints, all that disturbed soil or the ridge that pops up happens right behind the toes. Not in the mid part of the foot, like we saw in the film subject's footprints. So we know that these were made from fake stompers, because they don't leave signatures like that. And that's because the Sasquatch foot is a very bendy thing. These are drawings done by Meldrum, or somebody Meldrum got to do for him, Dr. Meldrum. Over here, we're going to start here, because this is a human foot. When humans walk, they push off at the very end on this part of the bone. This bone right here is called the metatarsals. There's 5 of them, metatarsal, and there's 5 of them, so metatarsals. And at the very tip here, in the front part, we call that the head of the metatarsals. And that's where human feet push off. We do that because we have an arch. Unless you have fallen arches, we have a longitudinal arch. Now, we have that arch because of what our ancestors did. We grew into that. We evolved into that. Now, our ancestors, which is really hard for me to remember when I sit my fat butt behind a computer, right? But our ancestors are long-distance runners. Human beings are amongst the fastest animals on the planet over long distances. We are made for it. Which, like I said, is really hard to remember because, God, I hate running. Like, it's the worst, right? Holy crap, it's terrible. But that's why we don't have a big, thick coating of hair. We kind of lost a lot of our hair covering so we can radiate the heat out as we run. Otherwise, we'd overheat and die. Oh, let me define persistence hunting for you, by the way, so you know what I'm talking about. We are persistence hunters. In other words, that goat looks like dinner. I'm gonna chase it. When I get tired, I'm gonna tag team you in, and I'm gonna rest while you chase it. When you get tired, let me know. I'll chase it some more. Back and forth, for 4 to 6 hours. Eventually, that poor goat never got a rest. It collapses from heat exhaustion. We jump on it, and we celebrate dinner. That's what persistence hunting is. That's why we have an arch in our foot. That arch absorbs the shock of repetitively hitting the ground. It also gives a slight spring to our step as we run. That's why we don't have a hair coating. Did you know you have the same number of follicles, more or less, as all the other ape species? They don't all have hair coming out of them. We've lost it. But when you get cold and there's goosebumps on you, all of those are your hair follicles. Just they don't all have hair coming out anymore because we want to radiate heat to our environment because of what our ancestors did. Now, Sasquatches aren't persistence hunters. To the degree we were, I should say. I've got some very interesting eyewitness reports that I kind of give credence to. But they also have a huge hair covering, right? They're really, really big, so they retain a lot of heat. Because that's also one of the reasons that we're slender as we are as a species. Like tall, slender runner sort of folks. We radiate heat out. Just like desert animals tend to be small and slender. But Sasquatches are big and bulky to retain heat. They have hair coverings to retain the heat. So they don't have the same adaptation as we do. They've retained flexibility right there. It's called the mid-tarsal joint. It's not really a joint, it's a bunch of bones working together that kind of serve as one device in their feet. It's kind of like when you flex your hand. It's kind of like the same thing. There's a bunch of bones there acting together. They can do that in their feet. By the way, every other ape species except for humans have the same adaptation. Every other one, gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, you name it. Bigfoot still have that. It turns out it serves them very, very well in their environment. But because of that, when they step off, they don't step off on the heads of their metatarsals right there. They push off with the entirety of their metatarsals, which raises a little mound of dirt right behind the mid part of their foot. Kind of interesting. Over here on the left, we have 2 human footprints. Over here on the right, Patterson Gimlin footprints. This is the one of the big mountain ridge of dirt, right there. From the back, the base of their metatarsals pushing off. Over here, remember the big jumble of dirt chunks? Same thing. The ground just moved in big chunks. Mid-tarsal pressure disc. Humans, look at that pressure disc right behind the heads of their metatarsals. Look at this mound of dirt going across that has been raised right behind the heads of their metatarsals. These are very special human prints, by the way. No, they are actually. I mean, normally I get it like insert joke here, right? No, but these are special because I photographed these in Brazil when I visited a tribe that doesn't wear shoes. See, your feet, like you look at your pinky, your toe or whatever, and it's always curled underneath. Your toes generally stick together because you wear shoes. You've trained your toes to be obedient. These guys, they just don't wear shoes. So it's kind of special in that way. It just shows a little bit extra splay in some of their toes. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's a big space in between those because this guy's pinky toe is kind of poking out a little bit more than yours would. Pretty cool. Another cool thing is that this tribe, and I'm not kidding here, here's the joke by the way, but I'm not kidding. The tribe's name is Tatuyu. I'm assuming they named it after the Stones album. Look at the cast that Bob Titmus cast. Think about the mid-tarsal thing we've been talking about. Well, this one's real flat. Okay, no big deal. Look at that. Look where it's bendy. Here's that one. This cast is on the back table, by the way. Look at all this broken junk where it appears. more or less straight across. This one's pretty flat too, but look, there's a little bend right there, and pretty flat. But this one, right there, right there, right there, a little bit right there. That feature appears at the same spot, exactly where it should anatomically, everywhere it appears. It doesn't appear in every print, and nor should it. Here's a lesson I want every one of you to go home with today, and there'll be homework. I'm speaking tomorrow. I'll check your homework. Memorize this concept. I don't care about the words. Memorize this concept. Footprints are not the shape of the foot. They are the shape of the damage done to the ground by the foot as the creature walks by. Entirely different thing. Think about that for a minute. The foot plants. The second the heel touches the ground, all the weight is on the heel. It transfers to the middle part of the foot and rolls forward. Then as it pushes off, all that weight is on the entire front part of the foot as it pushes off. So you have a dynamic signature. In other words, damage done to the ground that changes as weight is redistributed, as the thing is taken a step, whether that thing is a Bigfoot or you. It's a dynamic signature of the interaction between your foot or a Bigfoot's foot and the ground. The consistency is remarkable. And let me say one thing about consistency real fast, for those of you who are still awake. People ask me a lot, what's the most compelling Bigfoot evidence that you know of? Thinking that I'm going to say the Patterson Gimlin film or the footprints or whatever. It's the consistency of all the available evidence and how it fits together. That is beyond evidence. That is proof as far as I can tell. Proof without a body. That we have the consistency in these footprints that matches the consistency in other footprints. We have things from 1800s, behavior characteristics that are still reported today. And I can go on for a long, long time, but I'm not going to do that because, I don't have all night. But here is a recreation of the bone structure done by Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who's a professional anatomist, whose specialty is bipedalism. It seems he's particularly well suited for the Bigfoot thing, right? Yeah, his opinion matters more than ours because he's devoted his entire professional career to it. So this is his recreation of the Sasquatch bone structure, and it is a little bit different than humans. And let's look at that particularly bendy one that Lyle Laverty photographed from the side. It is very dramatic. And keep in mind that even though this is being pressed down into the print, this is actually a raised mound of dirt going up because it's a cast. It's like the opposite, right? Look where, and here's a top view of that same cast. Look where that bend is. I lined up the tip of the toes and then the base of the heel. Look where that bend is. Right behind the metatarsals. Here's another cast. This is the one with the mid-tarsal pressure disc. I turned it over sideways because you can see the topography a little bit better. Look where the bend is. Look where all this stuff is disturbed. Right behind the metatarsals. Consistency. Look where this one is. This is a fairly unknown cast. It's one of the Titmus casts. It's right there. But look at that from the side. Look how bendy that thing is. It's like a mountain range. It's fantastic. And sure enough, look where that is. Look where the bend happens. Here's another one. It's kind of a blobby print, but Titmus got it. And this is the interesting thing. Look where it happens. Right behind it. It's consistent. Footprint to footprint. Now that's just Patty, of course. Uninformed skeptics would say, okay, so that person in the suit was wearing a certain kind of prosthetic. It's a prosthetic like a fake foot. And that just happens to be what that fake foot did, because this is all great data and all, but it is from one subject. That should hold true for footprints in general that are supposedly from Sasquatches. And sure enough, they do. This footprint is from Montana, I think 2011, if I remember right. And I superimposed the reconstruction over the footprint, and that ridge right there, look where it is. Bam, right behind the metatarsals. Pretty cool. If you're a nerd. Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Look at this print in the snow from Georgia. Mid-tarsal pressure disc. And where is it? Right where it should be. Oh, by the way, this print, there are these amazing handprints that went with it. I'll show you those tomorrow. Look at this. Here's that titmus cast here and here. And look at this cast. You turn on the side, look where that bend happens. Let me tell you about that cast. In Shennonja, China, a forest worker saw a yeren, which translates to wild man. It was at the water, it was doing something, it saw the guy, it's a forest worker, it's like a ranger basically. A ranger saw this thing in a national park. The thing saw the ranger, it ran off. The dude went down, the ranger went down, and there were footprints there, so he cast them. Dr. Meldrum was over there in China, visiting, trying to gather some information and data, filming some show or something like that. He met the man. And through a translator, got the whole story for it and all that sort of stuff. And saw the prints. And he realized, holy smokes, look at that. These are the original prints, but look at the side. It's exactly where it should be. The ranger, the Chinese ranger, didn't speak a lick of English. Not a bit. Through the translator, he asked Dr. Meldrum, do you have anything like the wild man in your country? Think about that for a minute. How would he know the morphology of a primate that walks on two legs that most people doesn't even say exist? They don't even say they exist. He didn't even know that Bigfoots are a thing, mythological or real. He had no idea. Do you have something like the Chinese wild man in your country, he asks? This is beyond evidence. It's darn good evidence. Because the consistency. It's not the one footprint. It's the consistency between all of them. This is really cool, because this is the titmus cast, and this down here is a side view of this cast. The very first Bigfoot cast, ever cast that we know of. 1958, Jerry Crew. This animal is named Bigfoot. That's why we call it Bigfoot. They named this individual animal the word Bigfoot instead of Hank. Or whatever. You get what I'm saying. And look at that, right there, from the very beginning, right in front of our eyes, where this evidence was right there. We just didn't have eyes to see it. It wasn't until 1996 that this was explained anatomically in the context of other great apes. But yet there it was, 1958, and in the Patterson Gimlin film. You can see this bendiness in the PG film. Now you can't see her entire foot, but you can imagine the ground level coming across, something like that, right? You can see her heel. We can actually see it lift up too. You can see her heel. Her foot is bending right here. It's not pressing 6 inches or more into the ground. It's bending right there. You can see this action in the film. Now, the heel of a Sasquatch is also elongated. It's longer than ours, or it appears to be so. You can actually see it in there. There's an example there too, and this too, but let me tell you about why. We're going to get back to this slide in a moment. Your foot is like a lever. We all know how levers work, right? You push it down here and it lifts it up here, right? Now let's say for a minute, instead of this, if you wanted to lift this, it's a lot bigger, right? So you would have to use a lot more force to push down, represented here by the big green arrow, my little 10-year-olds. You know, no one changes between 10 and 46, I guarantee you. Guarantee you. So anyway, if you want to lift this, you'd have to push down a lot harder, right? Expend a lot more energy. Or you could move this thing closer to the middle. You see what I mean? If you move this thing, it's called a fulcrum, by the way. If you move the fulcrum closer to the middle, you don't have to exert so much force. Turns out your foot is a fancy lever. But instead of the fulcrum being on the bottom, it is on the top, your ankle bone. What happens is that on the back of your heel bone right here, tendons and ligaments and all that good stuff is attached to your thigh muscle above the ceiling. And when you walk, your thigh muscle pulls upwards on this, and it bends it like, you know, it kind of pushes you along, like that. You get my drift? File that away for a second, and let's talk about these interesting footprints that were found in about 1969. They had a strange deformity to them. In fact, back in the day, they called this individual Sasquatch crippled foot. Well, Dr. Grover Krantz, who gave the Sasquatch about a 10% chance of being real at the time, said, yeah, okay, I'll drive a few hours and go check it out. Maybe they are real. And he saw these two bulges. So, well, that's odd. So he took the cast, and knowing what he knows about bone morphology, he said, you know what, if there's only two bulges on the outside of the foot, that would probably correspond to the spaces between the three bones on the outside of the foot. There's just three bones there. So the two bulges are probably the spaces in between. And once you start putting these bones in place, the rest of them kind of just fall in like a jigsaw puzzle that you're seeing the pattern of. And what he found is that in these footprints, this is a Sasquatch reconstruction, and this is a human reconstruction. Well, we know what the human bones look like. The ankle bone is shifted forward on the foot. See how this ankle bone right here is further forward than this one? What would that do to your heel? It would make it look longer. Right there. And this is the Skookum heel cast from the Skookum cast. If you've heard of that, you've probably also heard the criticism of it, saying, oh no, that's an elk lay. You know, like deer and elk, they lay in the ground, and that's just the elbow of the front leg of the elk. All right, that's fine and good. Skeptics are saying that, and maybe they're right. However, the elk experts that have seen the cast say that's not an elk lay. So you believe who you want to believe. Skeptics that are looking for straws to grasp at, or elk experts who say that's no elk lay. But sure enough, oops, that's the heel of the Skookum cast. There's the Achilles tendon. Remember, it attaches to your calf muscles and the heel, and it's a lot bigger. By the way, Darius Swindler, terrible name, great dude. He is a gorilla expert. It was this cast that convinced Darius Swindler that Sasquatches were a real biological creature. And the fact that this cast corresponds to this photograph, a frame from the film, corresponding to the reconstruction of the footprints dating back to 1969, 1970, says something to me. The PG film has given us all something. For many of us, myself included probably, it's kind of why I'm here today. If it wasn't for those in search ofs back in the 1970s when I was a little boy, and my fascination with monsters of all sorts, Godzilla, Bigfoot, you name it, I would not be here today. I would be somewhere else causing trouble. it's something that we can all celebrate. It's like the Force, it binds us together. It's the year. This is it, 50. She's still standing. The film is still there. No one has brought it down, and you know they've tried. In 2 weeks, this is the film set, by the way. This is taken from where Roger and Bob first saw the creature. There's a berm over here. The ground level is much higher at that point because of a flood that happened 3 years before. She walked there. In fact, she walked there. The film site's still there. The film's still here. The evidence is right there. And we all, as Bigfooters, have something to celebrate. So go to the woods. If you need me, I'm there. I'm either here or one of these places. I'm not a celebrity, believe it or not. I'm just a Bigfooter. I'm one of you. I'm one of us. You know, if you need me, reach out. I'm more than happy to look at your evidence. I said it today, I'm more than happy to give you my 2 cents on whatever you show me, though I admit it may only be worth 1. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, too.